Hello and welcome, I'm Ellie Richardson and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. President Donald Trump raised the global duty on imports into the United States to 15%, doubling down on his promise to maintain his aggressive tariff policy a day after the Supreme Court ruled much of it illegal. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva urged Donald Trump to treat all countries equally after the US leader imposed a 15% tariff on imports. US envoy Steve Witkoff said on Saturday that President Donald Trump is questioning why Iran has not capitulated in the face of Washington's military buildup. Russia fired scores of missiles and drones at targets across Ukraine, crashing into energy and rail infrastructure and residential buildings. Pakistan has said it launched multiple airstrikes targeting militants in neighbouring Afghanistan, where the government reported children were among dozens of the people killed and wounded. Arab and Islamic countries issued a joint condemnation of remarks by US Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee, who suggested Israel had biblical right to a vast swath of the Middle East. Greenland does not need medical assistance from other countries, Denmark's defence minister has said, after US President Donald Trump claimed he has sent a hospital ship to Greenland. Somaliland is willing to give the United States access to its minerals and military bases, a minister has told AFP, as the breakaway region of Somalia seeks international recognition. And for your top story this hour, a senior EU lawmaker, Bernd Lange, has proposed delaying the vote on the EU-US trade deals scheduled for this week due to the recent changes in terms and legal foundations following the US Supreme Court's decision to strike down President Donald Trump's global tariffs. This comes after the court's ruling prompted Trump to impose a temporary 10% tariff, which was later raised to 15%. Lange criticised the tariff chaos caused by the US administration, stating that growing uncertainty affects the EU and other US trading partners. The EU-US deal, originally struck up at Trump's Turnberry golf course in Scotland last year, requires EU government's approval and clearance from the European Parliament. The Greens and other lawmakers have joined Lange in urging the vote to be paused, citing the shifting circumstances. We are now being joined by retired Colonel Sanjit Saroy, who is an international relations and defence expert, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you for joining us here today on NewsX World. How might the uncertainty and tariff chaos cited by EU trade leaders affect trust between the European Union and the United States, and what implication could this have for broader EU-US economic partnership?
Ellie, good evening. Thank you very much for having me on your news channel. Now, this is the latest development, and this development has taken place because of the United States Supreme Court passing the judgment, in which case all these tariffs which were levied by Mr. Donald Trump have been illegalized. That means they have said that it is not a legal listing. So if these are not legal, and then the Donald Trump administration has again put tariff of 10%, then raised to 15%. So there is total uncertainty as far as the trade is concerned with America. So I think every country who has gone into a trade deal with Americans have to now rethink, and then after that to decide, because there is total uncertainty what will happen next, how much the increase will take place. With this as a background, I think EU lawmakers have taken the correct decision to delay the voting on this EU-US deal and wait till that time, till the things are very, very clear. Ellie.
And what legal and political questions are being raised by the argument that the basis on which the EU-US trade deal was negotiated has fundamentally changed? And should such a situation justify delaying or renegotiating the agreement?
Look, Ellie, if you see that initially Donald Trump administrations have put tariff, and then Supreme Court has made them illegal. So if that be the case, then the all other US partners who are having trade with US, now they have to rethink, because they don't know what will be the next tariff rates. So if it was 10%, then increased to 15%, tomorrow it so happened that it may be brought down to 10% again, or may increase to 25%. So till such time the things are very, very clear, I think not only European Union, but any other country who is going to sign a trade deal with America, they have to rethink, and then they have to wait till that time, till everything's become crystal clear. Ellie.
And from this tariff policy, what strategies could the EU adopt to protect its economic interest whilst also preserving transatlantic cooperation? And where might compromise be possible between the EU and Washington?
Well, Ellie, if you see the developments which have been taking place the last 2-3 months, initially there were a lot of tariffs. Donald Trump has thought of levying a lot of tariff for European Union. Then there came Greenland issue, in which there were a lot of between both the countries. There was a mistrust between EU and the United States. And after that, now with this changing the tariff from 10% to 50%, and then US court passing the judgment of making all these tariffs illegal. So I think the European Union has to balance it, because on the one hand they have to maintain the transatlantic treaty. They are still dependent on US for everything, even for their security also. And secondly, they have to maintain the interest of European Union. So if that be the case, then European Union has to do the balancing act. And in that, they may have to compromise on some issues if they want to give priority to transatlantic treaty. If they think that they can manage their affairs on their own, then I think they were not going to give any concession to the Americans after European Union has had a very good deal with India and all other countries. So there is a bargaining power with European Union, and I think they will take into consideration their own interests first, and then they will see whether they can balance it out with Americans.
And how are different political groups within the European Parliament, such as the Greens and other sceptics, framing their opposition to move ahead with this vote? And what does this reveal about intra-EU debates over trade and sovereignty?
Look, Ellie, if once the European Union goes for the voting in the European Parliament, then only we will come to know that who gives the vote in favor and who goes against it. But if the parties which are opposing it, if they are in majority, then I think this trade deal this voting may even go in favor of those people who are opposing it. So we have to see, because everything which has to be done with European Union and Americans, it has to be passed by the European Parliament. So it is only the Parliament who has got the final authority to make sure that the deal goes through. So that we have to see in the coming days, that how the European Union leaders, they try to adjust accordingly.
Thank you so much, Sanjeet, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. Alice Weidel, co-chair of the Alternative for Germany party, has called for a return to energy imports from Russia, arguing that Germany urgently needs reforms to remain internationally competitive. Speaking at an AfD event, Weidel emphasised the necessity of affordable and reliable energy supplies for Germany, suggesting that nuclear energy and Russian oil and gas are crucial for achieving this goal. She also advocated for peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, criticising Western countries, especially the UK, for obstructing peace agreements in the past. Since February 2022, Germany has moved away from Russian energy supplies, relying on terminals after the Nord Stream pipelines were damaged. We are now being joined by Professor David K. Johnston, who's a professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, joining us from New York. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. What are the economic and political arguments being made by Alice Weidel and the AfD in urging Germany to resume imports in Russian oil and gas? And how do these positions challenge current EU energy policy?
Well, the EU has basically weaned itself off of Russian natural gas and Russian oil. The EU is now getting a lot of liquefied natural gas from the United States, which is causing domestic problems because the price of natural gas has gone up significantly in the US, and we're having an especially cold and harsh winter. But the party is the right-wing party. Indeed, the Federal Office for the Protection of the German Constitution labels this party an extremist group. Now, they have a significant number of members of the Bundestag, the parliament in Germany, and they have been described by a number of people as essentially the new 21st century Nazi party. I think that may be a little strong, but without any question, they have a close affinity for dictators like Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin. So anything they can do to suppress democracy in Ukraine and support the dictatorial government in Moscow seems to be central to their political efforts in Germany.
And how might this shift back to the Russian energy supplies, which has been opposed by majority EU members since the start of the war with Ukraine, affect their foreign policy, including the fact that she spoke about that how she wants to help with peace talks with Ukraine and Russia, but she also wants to go back to Russian energy supplies. How might this affect Germany's outlook, really?
Well, the German government is not going to change its policy because of the request of this minority party. Now, if they in a future election become a majority, that would change the ballgame. But for now, this is just talk, and it's easy talk. And the AfD position seems, and I emphasize the word seems, clearly to support Russia's notion that they should be given not just the territory they have aggressively taken by military force, but the parts of Ukraine they want given to them and just handed over. And that's going to be a complete non-starter with the German government and every EU government, because they all recognize that Vladimir Putin intends to move his tanks into other countries if he's successful in Ukraine.
Thank you. Please don't go too far, as we will be joining back with you very shortly. Kyiv's Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has said that he tries to trust the US President Donald Trump, and he often struggles to understand Trump's messages on ending the war. Klitschko has added that any peace deal must not amount to a capitalization to Russia, and insisted Ukraine would need firm guarantees to prevent future attacks. However, the US has been trying to broker a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, but progress has been halting, with Russia demanding Ukraine withdraw from parts of the eastern Donbas region it still controls, an idea which Kyiv has rejected. Meanwhile, Kyiv's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, has reacted. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
I try to trust him, but sometime I'm not understand clearly the messages from President Trump regarding peace in Ukraine. It's peace in Ukraine is very important. It's very important for all the world, but peace in Ukraine definitely have to be not capitulation agreement between Ukraine and Russia. we have a lot of questions. Uh, First of all, stop the war. Second, what about our national interest? Third one, it's about guarantee because Russians can stop and make the break for a short period of time, and after that make next waves of invasion. And that's why we have to give the answer for many questions. National interest, our unity, our independency, the guarantee of Russia, and also guarantee of our partners for Ukraine. Um, and it's complex of questions. It's not just one.
We are now being rejoined by Professor David K. Johnston. Thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. Thank you for coming back. In light of recent stalled trilateral peace talks involving the US and mixed messages and unclear communication from the White House, how important is Washington's role in shaping a viable negotiation framework? And what happens if Kyiv no longer sees the US as an effective mediator from all of this miscommunication?
Well, I don't think that the regime in Kyiv sees the U.S. as a loyal ally. They see someone as they keep trying to corral and keep on the ranch to support liberty and freedom for the Ukrainian people, so they're not under the Kremlin's boot. Now, the mayor, who you just had on at length, back in 2014, was a supporter of the Russian puppet who was overthrown by the Ukrainian people. He now is speaking very consistently about sovereignty and supporting the policies of Zelensky in his public comments. But people should keep in mind there was a time when he was a supporter of the Russian puppet who was president rather, in Ukraine. The problem the Ukrainians have is that Donald Trump, having said he would settle this war in one day, even before he resumed office, and having failed to do so, he could completely withdraw U.S. support. If that were to happen, the Ukrainians would be in deep trouble militarily. They have, at a great price, managed to limit Russian advances. And the Russians have paid an enormous price in dead and wounded soldiers to gain tiny little increments of land. In the last year, they've gained about 0.5% of the Ukrainian territory. So keeping Donald Trump from abandoning Ukraine is the first and foremost task right now of political leaders in Ukraine.
And what are the risks and implications for Ukraine of appearing to question the trustworthiness of its most significant military and diplomatic backer, as it seems, particularly as pressure mounts for compromise in peace negotiations, as we know they haven't really gone as planned in the past recent talks?
Well, first of all, the European nations have put more war material into this war than the United States. Just to be clear about that, significantly more. But the Trump administration has long argued the side and the case of the Kremlin. The Trump peace plan was very, very similar to the Kremlin plan, which was give us all the land we've taken, give us all the land we think we should have that we haven't been able to take, and that's just unacceptable, 100% unacceptable to the Ukrainians. It's unacceptable to the other NATO members besides the United States. So what's happening right now is Donald Trump has indicated he has a red line on the calendar, and there has to be a settlement by a date certain, and the fear is he might just withdraw the U.S. entirely. Of course, Donald, who I've known and I've reported on for almost 40 years, he is very mercurial. He does not have any guiding underlying ideology. It's all about him personally. He's appallingly ignorant about world affairs, but he admires and seeks the approval of dictators like Kim, Xi, and Putin.
Thank you so much, David K. Johnson, for joining us here on NewsX World. Thank you. Former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, in an interview, has urged the UK to send non-combat troops to Ukraine. Johnson argued that there is no logical reason to delay such support, emphasising the need for a peaceful ground presence to demonstrate Britain's commitment to a free and independent Ukraine. Reflecting on the West's approach to Ukraine, Johnson expressed regret over the failure to provide clarity about Ukraine's NATO ambitions, suggesting that clearer promises could have prevented Russia's invasion. The UK has not yet confirmed the number of troops it might send, with Prime Minister Keir Starmer indicating that plans are still being finalised. Johnson also highlighted the importance of supporting Ukraine's sovereignty amid ongoing conflict. Let's listen to what the former British Prime Minister had to say.
But if we're going to have a plan for boots on the ground after the war, after Putin has condescended to have a ceasefire, then why not do it now? Just to make this point that it is up to the Ukrainians. I mean, these people wouldn't be there in a war-fighting capacity, right? There's no logical reason that I can see why we shouldn't send some peaceful ground forces there to show our support, our constitutional support for a free, independent Ukraine. That this is a political thing. It's about whether Ukraine is a free country or not. If it's a vassal state of Russia, which is what Putin wants, then obviously it's up to Putin to decide who comes to his country. If it's not, then it's up to the Ukrainians.
Pope Leo XIV has called for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine, urging the silencing of weapons and the start of peace talks during his Angelus prayer. Marking the 4th anniversary of Russia-Ukraine war, he stressed that peace is urgently needed as it's causing immense suffering to the people. Pope encouraged people to pray for Ukraine and all those suffering from conflict. According to reports, he has shown continuous support by sending humanitarian aid to Ukraine and offering to help with peace talks, all while urging the international community to act.
Sono passati ormai 4 anni dall'inizio della guerra contro l'Ucraina. Il mio cuore va ancora alla drammatica situazione che sta sotto gli occhi di tutti. Quante vittime, quante vite e famiglie spezzate, quanta distruzione, quante sofferenze indicibili. Davvero, ogni guerra è una ferita inferta all'intera famiglia umana. La pace non può essere rimandata, è un'esigenza urgente che deve trovare spazio nei cuori e tradursi in decisioni responsabili. Per questo rinnovo con forza il mio appello. Tacciano le armi, cessino i bombardamenti, si giunga senza indugio a un cessate il fuoco e si rafforzi il dialogo per aprire la strada alla pace.
That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti.